Scene script: Kremlin says Russian citizen released in U.S. after Trump greets freed teacher. Donald Trump has welcomed home American schoolteacher Marc Fogel after he was released from prison in Russia, with the U.S. president saying Vladimir Putin had got not much in return. Trump said that another detainee would be freed on Wednesday without giving their name. Mr. Fogel, a 63-year-old former diplomat, landed at Joint Base Andrews just outside Washington, D.C. late on Tuesday evening before traveling to the White House. The Kremlin made no initial comment, but said on Wednesday that a Russian citizen was being freed in the U.S. as part of the deal and would return home in the coming days. Trump, standing alongside Mr. Fogel in the White House, said, "To me, he looks damned good." He told reporters the release was a show of good faith from the Russians and that it could be a big important part of ending Russia's war in Ukraine. "We were treated very nicely by Russia," he said. "Actually, I hope that's the beginning of a relationship where we can end that war and millions of people can stop being killed." Hundreds of thousands of people, the majority of them soldiers, are believed to have been killed since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 3 years ago. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Wednesday that, while such agreements build trust between countries, they were unlikely to be a turning point in a relationship. Peskov said he would not name the Russian who was being released as part of the exchange until they had returned home. Trump said earlier that the prisoner deal with Russia was very fair, very reasonable, and that somebody else is being released tomorrow that you will know of. "I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now," said Mr. Fogel. "I'm a middle-class school teacher who's now in a dream world." Mr. Fogel's sister Anne Fogel earlier told the BBC that her brother, who was detained in Russia in 2021, was moved last Wednesday from a penal colony in Rybinsk. She said the family had known his release was a possibility, but also that the negotiations were very tenuous. After landing on U.S. soil, the White House posted on X, "Promises made, promises kept," along with a picture of Mr. Fogel. In a statement obtained by CBS News, the BBC's U.S. news partner, his wife Jane, and sons Ethan and Sam said, "This has been the darkest and most painful period of our lives, but today, we begin to heal." Mr. Fogel was arrested at an airport for illegal possession of cannabis in 2021. He was charged with carrying a small amount of medical marijuana, which had been prescribed in the U.S., and given a 14-year prison sentence. Mr. Fogel's legal team thanked Trump for his role in the negotiation and criticized what they called the bureaucratic inaction of the Biden administration. President Trump secured Marc's release in just a few weeks, wasting no time in taking decisive action to bring Marc home, a statement from his lawyers also sent to CBS said. Mr. Fogel was not classed by the U.S. government as wrongfully detained until December 2024, despite beginning his sentence in 2022. His family had tried to push former President Joe Biden to secure his release, and were left disappointed when he was left out of prisoner exchanges in 2022 and 2024. U.S. basketball star Brittany Griner, who was arrested in Russia on a similar charge of cannabis possession in 2022, was freed in an exchange for Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout 10 months later. Subsequently, the Biden administration secured the release of 3 more Americans last year as part of the biggest prisoner exchange between Russia and the West since the Cold War. The Americans freed were Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, U.S. Marine veteran Paul Whelan, and Russian-American radio journalist Alsu Kurmasheva. Anne Fogel told the BBC at the time of feeling betrayal when she learnt that her brother was not included in the prisoner exchange, which Biden had lauded as a feat of diplomacy. At least 10 Americans remain in prison in Russia. They include Gordon Black, a U.S. Army staff sergeant who flew to Vladivostok to see his girlfriend and was then accused of stealing from her, and Robert Woodland, who was adopted from Russia as a child and was working as an English teacher when he was convicted of drugs offenses. Marc Fogel, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, had been working as a teacher at the Anglo-American School of Moscow. He had previously worked as a diplomat at the U.S. Embassy there. While in prison, he reportedly taught English to fellow inmates. It is unclear if the U.S. released someone in return for Mr. Fogel. Mr. Fogel flew back to the U.S. with Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. Witkoff's trip to Russia is the first by a senior U.S. official to the country in a number of years. Most contact between the nations was shut off following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Waltz said Mr. Fogel's release was a sign we are moving in the right direction to end the brutal and terrible war in Ukraine. He did not provide further details. Trump announced earlier on Tuesday that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent would travel to Ukraine later this week. During his presidential campaign, Trump promised to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. But in an interview with Fox News on Monday, he said, "They may make a deal, they may not make a deal. They may be Russian someday, or they may not be Russian someday." Asked by the BBC about the link made by officials between the release and the conflict in Ukraine, Fogel said, "These are the giant machinations of world politics at play. It's going to be interesting to look back at this and to see how this all fits in and how history plays out." Thank you for watching Topics on Trend. Go ahead and check out another trending video on our channel here, like subscribe, comment, and share.